Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining everybody for another whiskey review. Today, we're going to be talking about a release that has intrigued me over the last couple years, but I've never pulled the trigger. And finally, with the third release of this whiskey, I saw it on the shelf, only $70 with a 14-year age statement. It was time to pull the trigger. And I'm glad I did, because I am missing the richer oak profiles in these double-digit age bourbons. We don't get that too often. And when we do get it, man, you're usually spending upwards of $100+ to get those type of oak profile notes in your bourbon. There was a day that used to not be the case, and I'm glad to see releases like this back on the shelf. What are we talking about? Well, stick around. Thank you for joining today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. Got it airing out here. We'll give those 14 years a little room to breathe before we get into the tasting part of it. Let me pull up the stats on this one, but we're going to have some fun. We are going tubing today. Always love pulling whiskey out of a good tube. So this is the tin cup. Now, with the tin cup, they come with tin cups. I always think those are attached to the bottle, but really glad I didn't put too much pressure on that. But they do come with these tin cups on top of the bottle here. This is the third release of the Tin Cup 14er. And what they do is they have this old MGP and they proof it down to 84 proof using Colorado spring water. Now, with these going down to 84 proof, that might seem like a drastic jump to some people. But one thing I do want people to keep in mind as we go through this review and as we do a comparison of this bourbon versus the Gatsby Reserve later on from Remus. The important thing to remember in this is that this era of MGP, this was released this year. So let's just imagine that this was coming out in or distilled in 2019, 2010, kind of an era, epic era for MGP, one of my favorite eras of any whiskey brand. Thus, it always excites me to get my hands on it. I do have a single barrel of Old Scout here. Now, this is from that same era. This one was probably distilled in 2007, 2008, released in 2018, 2019, if I remember correctly on when I got this thing. But this is cast strength. And if I zoom in here, let's see if I can get that to show you there. What you can see is that cast strength, this single barrel is only right above 100 proof. So a lot of the times, the single barrels that were coming out from MGP during this era were right at 100 proof. I've got a lot of examples like that from Old Scout, OKI, all those type of things. They did have some low proof, and that extends into the release of, let's say, the Remus Gatsby Reserve, which has come out the last 2 years. The one I have in my hands is from 2 years ago, and it is at cast strength at 97.8 proof. Cast strength at 97.8 proof. So if they're using similar distillate on this one and proofing it down to 84, they're only taking they're only adding so much water, I guess is my point of that. Did get it for $70, as I mentioned off the top, got it from Northern Kentucky, and age stated at 14 years, which for the price is a rarity these days. Now, as we go through the tasting itself, I'm going to walk through the nose, the palate, and the finish, but just to get a little preview of what I'll be talking about here. Love the nose, 2 thumbs up. It is my favorite part of this particular whiskey. Gave the palate a thumbs up, though I did teeter on maybe giving it a thumb sideways, but we'll go thumbs up and get into those details. Finish, more emphatic thumbs up. So let's get into the tasting notes on this one, and then we'll get into the final scores. So cheers, everybody. So the thing that really leaps out of the glass, the oak, of course, 14 years. The oak profile on this thing is gorgeous. And I miss those double-digit age whiskeys. I don't really get too many of them these days because usually the price is just over the top, and Calumet and those type of brands like stopped releasing the bourbons like they used to. But with this one, what accompanies the oak is some notes I miss as well from MGP. Used to get it from MGP from this era all the time. It's like a combination of a cherry and an apricot note. The other flavors that really come out of this would be a gingerbread cookie and some white pepper. So just a great nose. I could spend, time by the fire just sniffing on this thing. It's one of those whiskeys where I would just need one glass to get me through the night because I'd probably just be smelling it more than I am even sipping on it. But let's get into the taste. We'll start on the front palate and the mid palate. Cheers, everybody. Now, up front, definitely feel the fact that this has been watered down. It just has that more watered down texture to it, which takes the mouthfeel down just a little bit. And the volume on the flavors do seem a little bit diminished, though. What's there is still good. Lots of that oak, lots of the cherry. And one thing that really emerges too is some bright vanilla throughout this experience as well. As you get into front to mid palate, there's really no transition in the flavors. It's just those flavors again. So delicious, but not a whole lot of depth there. So let's get into the finish then. By the time you get into the finish, the volume on the flavors does increase, though they are essentially the same flavors through and through. That vanilla almost comes a little bit of a custard, which is really good. There's also a brininess, almost like it's on the outer shell of a soft pretzel, dipping that into some caramel sauce. The oak is there. The cherry apricot combination continues to play through. Absolutely delightful there, with the oak being the main event in all this. So very, very enjoyable pour, and happy that the finish does get its chance to shine despite its immediate presentation on the front of the palate and the mid palate. So let me go for one more sip, see if I got anything else. No, I think that about sums it up there. So if you're looking for something with an oak profile, man, don't avoid this one. Let me go back one more slide here. So on the channel here, we do have a 3-tier scoring system, whole bunch of metrics behind the scenes that roll into these, but you can summarize them as flavor, experience, and value. So as you kind of heard me throughout this, love the flavors. It essentially just got 8s across the board, all great flavors. The experience is where I teeter a bit with the mouthfeel, with the lack of depth. So that one went down to a 78. Whereas the value, come on, 14-year age statement, $70. Gets all the points. Delicious for what it is. So the final score on this one is an 81 out of 100. So not a bottle that I'm just going to say, hey, you got to buy this one, overly recommending it. But if you did buy this one, I don't think you're going to be disappointed in either. It fits exactly where it is on the shelf in the price range, especially for something with that age statement, which makes it a little bit of a commodity. Now, what we can compare this to, which I think is interesting, is that Remus Gatsby Reserve that I was talking about earlier. One of my favorite bottle designs, maybe of all time. This box can be a bit flimsy, and I know they've gotten rid of it with future releases, but they're still using this beautiful Art Deco bottle. I mean, this thing is just absolutely gorgeous. Now, with the Remus Gatsby here, this one was a 15-year release, essentially coming from the same era as this 14-year, around a 2-year difference there probably on its distillation date. But it is cask strength at 97.8 proof, as I mentioned on the top here. So just pretty much with this tin cup, imagine they started with this and proofed it down to 84 with that Colorado water to get this. Now, what's interesting, though, is you're talking about comparing a $70 bourbon to a $230 bourbon. Now, I know the old MGP in it itself is a commodity, but is it worth that much more than the tin cup? That was really the question that I wanted to answer here, and we can do a little side by side. So in this glass, I've got the Gatsby, and then I've got the rest of what I had on the tin cup. So let's get into the Gatsby here. I'll just give a few notes, send everybody off. So cheers, everybody. travels a very similar road, though I will say the extra proof does bring the volume up on all the flavors. The apricot cherry combinations there, the oak profile is near identical and absolutely gorgeous. The mouthfeel is stronger. The finish is a little stronger. So all these things add up when it comes to those extra 13 proof points. But do they add up to another $160? Ugh, that's the part that's definitely difficult to justify if you could find both of these on the shelf at the same time. What you would be getting is a superior whiskey with the Gatsby, but for the price, hard to say. The other thing that's interesting on this one with the Gatsby, that vanilla note that is pretty predominant in the tin cup isn't there as much. It is overall a much darker profile on the Gatsby than the tin cup, but that's really, I think, the main difference all in all. For the Gatsby, this one would grade out about an 83 versus an 81. So got a few extra points there on the mouthfeel, on some of the depth of the flavors mid-palate, but that was about it. So one more sip on the Gatsby. We'll see if I got any other thoughts here. No, I mean, they're so similar through and through. I think if you did these two blind and you didn't know what they were, the Gatsby would probably win, but I don't think you'd understand that they are one's 3 times more than the other one. So let's do a little blend here, send everybody off. So let me know in the comments if you've had any of these tin cup releases. I've only had the third release that I have in my hands right now. If you've had the first release, the second release, what do you think? If you've had all of them, have they been getting better? Were the first releases better? Totally curious on that as well. But spread the news out to the community and let them know your thoughts too. All right, let's see how this blend does. It's probably about 90 proof. Perfectly in the middle. The Gatsby wins overall versus the blend. That's got to be expected. But once again, then, we'd grade the blend at like an 82 then. It's right down the middle. So thank you for joining today, everybody. Once again, let us know what you think in the comments of this, and we'll catch you on the next whiskey review. Goodbye, everybody.